Out-of-town expenses. Expenses incurred while working or looking for work, requiring an overnight stay. Working or looking for work. And you have to lay your head on a pillow. That's what the case said in U.S. tax court. So you have to stay overnight. So you can't be, going from, Chicago to 2 hours away to shoot a commercial and then back the same night and say, well, yeah, but can't I take the train out there, or can't I just take the mileage out there? No, you're not staying overnight. You're going to work. You're commuting, right? Whether you drive or take a train or a shuttle or anything else, you're going to work. So this requires that you stay overnight, and we'll look at the form itself. And this, by the way, these forms can be used with any professional preparer. So feel free to use them for your own organization. And if you present them to your professional preparer, I guarantee they're not going to throw you out the door. They might have their own that they prefer you use, which is fine. But if you, absent anything else, these are good organizers for you. In sort of a third of the way down, it says employer and out-of-town addresses where you traveled. Include the city and the state. And the reason we want to know the city and the state is because your preparer can take a standard meal allowance based on what Congress has determined, are appropriate meal allowances for the cities in which you worked, right? So that's why we need to know that. You put the dates you were away, the number of nights you spent there, and whether or not you got per diem and how much. So you were out on tour. We'll probably just look at the itinerary. You don't have to write down every single city. Usually people just bring us in the itinerary and we look at it. But depending on the tour you're on, your per diem might not cover everything. If it doesn't, what it was not covered, we can take as a deduction for you. If you went to Los Angeles, from Chicago for pilot season, and you say, oh, I want to go out there and, try my luck. Well, the plane ticket, a hotel or an apartment or an Airbnb or whatever it is, get receipts for all these things because you were out there looking for work and you stayed out there for several weeks. If you just go to a theater, you stop at the Playmakers Repertory Company in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and you want to have an audition and you decide to stay overnight because you want to work there, you do an audition and you leave. All the expenses associated with getting there, staying overnight, and getting back home are deductible. I don't know that many of you do that, but we do see it now and then. We do see some job search trips. Most of these things are for gigs, though, that you do out of town. You go out of town, you work in a Lord company, or you do an SPT or something, and you're staying for 4, 5, 6 weeks. We want to know about it because we can take a standard meal allowance. Chances are good they're shipping you out there and they're putting you up, right? But what are they not doing? They're not feeding you, unless it's between shows. So don't forget these things. They're very valuable. And down below, you'll see that for line A, we have column A, and line B, we have column B, and so forth. We want to know what you spent out of pocket getting there, air, train, or bus, on your lodging, your tips and gratuities, laundry and cleaning, local transit. If you rented a car, we want to know about that. And notice the asterisk takes you down to the bottom of the page. It says if you use your own car, you've got to complete the auto expense worksheet, which we'll get to in a moment. And then you add those all up, and then notice toward the bottom it says meals. Preparer will take a standard allowance. You don't have to keep track of your meals. This is the one item that you spend that you don't have to keep receipts for. Yay! Well, yeah, they're not smiling here. They're just saying, yeah. We're over you, Karas. We're totally over you. Okay. So that's that one. Now let's get to auto. And this, in some ways, is, well, this can be a valuable deduction for people, but it's one of the biggest pains in the neck because you have to keep a contemporaneous log to survive an audit. I've been through many of these, and they're brutal. I mean, they can be brutal. They go through every single page of your calendar. And they look at the mileage, and they look that you've added it up, and right? And what does contemporaneous mean? It means with time, right? It means timely. So you have to keep a timely log somewhere. And I know there are a lot of good apps, I've seen them, that you can download and log your mileage. And you can program it to keep track of commuting miles versus your business miles versus your personal miles. It's really, really important that you keep track of these things, because an examiner will go through it very, very specifically. In fact, I had a client some years ago, and she was really meticulous, but she inverted two numbers, and from there on, she was off by, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 miles or something. Just, we got to the end, and he could see that where she had turned the numbers around. And I mean, he went through every day in her calendar. Yeah, it was painstaking. And I sat there, watching him do this, and he said, "Oop, there's a mistake here." And I didn't know it. I didn't go through all those with her. She just handed me her log. I figured it was, it looked good. And, she was so well organized everywhere else. He gave her a pass on it. But, it can happen. So use whatever system you have that works for you, that says, this is how I kept my records. Have a really good calendar. And if it's on your phone or on your tablet, link your app to it so that you're logging your miles right in there, and you don't have to think. You don't have to think about them. So we need to know if you owned or leased that car. It can't be your boyfriend's car, can't be your parents' car, can't be your roommate's car. It's got to be yours. You either own it or you lease it. And I don't mean an auto rental that you might have on a one-off or a zip car or something. That's just a rental car. But I mean, you lease a car, for a term, a 2-year term or a 3-year term, right? Or you bought it outright. We need to know the year, make, and model, and the date you placed it in service, which means when did you start using it for business, right? It could have been in 2006. We don't care, but we need to know the date. Total miles driven from January 1 through December 31. How are you going to find that out? Well, you got to look at your odometer, right? On January 1, you got to look at your odometer in December 31. You also have to, for an examination, you have to produce repair and maintenance logs and inspection log. I mean, those things are great to keep because they always log in the odometer reading. They always do. And examiners go, when was the last inspection? And they're waiting. They wait for that piece of paper to come at them. So don't be shy. Save this stuff, right? Total miles driven. Commuting miles. What's commuting miles? Driving to and from work. Driving to and from work. I don't care if it's a one-day job. It's going to work. It's not deductible, but it's commuting. You need to keep track of it. Business miles. What are business miles? Looking for work locally or out of town, working out of town overnight, or driving between two jobs on the same day. So you work in a diner for part of the day, you leave there, you put your fancy shoes on, and you go work in your theater job at night. The mileage between the diner job and the theater job is deductible. So you want to make sure that you log that. Or any kind of job search. Any kind of job search. If you're looking for work, it's sacrosanct in the code that you may deduct what it costs to get there. Charitable miles. We didn't talk about that, but all the miles you log, going to visit children's ward to read to kids on a weekly basis, or all those miles you log singing carols in the hospitals at the holiday time, or whatever it is you do. We have people who come into VITA 4 days a week, and they pay to get there just to serve their fellow members. That's a lot of extra usage of public transit or an automobile or whatever. So we ask people to keep track of miles. Medical miles, I mentioned this already. Don't forget to log those. Moving miles. If you moved more than 50 miles, we're going to need to know the total miles that you moved. And it's usually something you can look up at the last minute. What's the distance between this city and this city? You can find it instantaneously online, but don't forget it. Other would be personal. And then we want to know about any business parking and tolls. Did you have to pay any tolls or pay to park when you came in for the audition? Equity Los Angeles now has this great parking lot. It's really wonderful. And So, you know, they don't have the cost that they used to have years ago. But many of you have to pay for parking, and it can get very expensive. Medical parking and tolls and charitable parking and tolls. So that's a lot of information. I want to address one question that a woman had. You'll notice that these forms say, if you're married, use a separate form. When we do a married return, we put both of your information on the return, but we separate it according to who owns it, right? Who owns the W-2, who got the 1099s, who had the interest. And if it was joint, we note that it's joint. We note whose expenses are whose and where and so on, because we split the return at the end and we see whether it's better to file jointly or separately. That's why we ask for married couples to use separate forms. Don't just lump them all in the same place, because we might want to file you separately.